When a biased cop makes a routine arrest based on prejudice, he never expects the tables to turn in the courtroom. But what happens when the person he tried to humiliate stands as a powerful force of justice? How will this confrontation reshape his life and challenge his beliefs? Before we dive into this riveting story of redemption and justice, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more gripping tales that challenge the status quo. You think you're untouchable just because you drive a fancy car? Officer Matt Walker's voice was sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. Naomi Bennett kept her hands on the steering wheel, her expression unreadable as she watched his face harden, the faint smirk of authority and something darker playing at the corner of his lips. License and registration. Now, he demanded, though she'd already handed it over minutes earlier. He held her documents in one hand, flipping through them like he was looking for an excuse, a crack, anything to justify the narrative he had already built in his mind. "Is there a problem, officer?" Naomi asked, her voice calm, controlled, too calm for Matt's liking. She didn't sound scared. Most people he stopped, especially ones like her, had that mix of fear and desperation in their voices. But this woman? No, she wasn't playing along. "You're driving a car that's worth more than most people's houses. That's problem enough." Matt shot back, folding his arms. "Step out of the vehicle." Naomi didn't move immediately, her eyes locking onto his. "May I ask why?" "I've complied with your requests. My license is valid, and the car is registered in my name. What exactly am I being detained for?" Matt felt the heat rise in his chest. He wasn't used to being questioned, especially not like this. There was something about her tailored outfit, her confident posture, that got under his skin. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," he snapped. Still, she didn't move. "Am I under arrest?" she pressed, tilting her head slightly. Her tone wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't submissive either. It was measured, like she knew exactly what she was doing. Matt clenched his jaw. Yes, you are." He reached for the door handle, and before she could object further, he yanked it open. Naomi stepped out, her movements deliberate, her eyes never leaving his face. She was taller than he expected, standing straight in her heels. She glanced briefly at the dash cam on his patrol car, then back at him. "This is a mistake," she said simply. Matt ignored her. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." He pulled out his handcuffs, his fingers itching with the satisfaction of control. Naomi complied, her composure unwavering as the cold steel closed around her wrists. "You don't know who I am, do you?" she said softly as he led her to the patrol car. "Does it matter?" Matt scoffed, pushing her into the back seat. He slammed the door shut, then leaned against the car for a moment, exhaling sharply. This wasn't supposed to bother him, but something about her words lingered. At the station, Naomi sat in the holding cell, her hands resting calmly in her lap. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, and the faint smell of stale coffee hung in the air. Matt stood across the room, watching her through the glass, a mixture of irritation and confusion bubbling in his chest. He didn't like how composed she was. People weren't supposed to look like that after being cuffed and brought in. They were supposed to look defeated, rattled. But Naomi Bennett sat there like she was waiting for a delayed flight at the airport. "Who is she?" Matt muttered under his breath as he walked back to his desk. He flipped through her file again. Naomi Bennett. No criminal record. A pristine driving history. A quick glance at the address showed a home in an affluent neighborhood. He frowned, feeling the first prickle of doubt. Matt, his partner, Officer Jake Ramirez, called from across the room. "You sure about this one? I ran her plates. Everything checks out. This might not look great." Matt bristled. She was being uncooperative. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Uncooperative? Huh. She looks like she's running for office. Maybe let her lawyer handle it before this blows up in your face." Matt waved him off. "I've got it under control." But as he sat back down, Naomi's words echoed in his mind. "You don't know who I am." The next morning, Matt arrived at court, still convinced he'd handled the situation by the book. He walked into the courtroom with confidence, expecting a quick hearing. Naomi would plead guilty, pay a fine, and that would be the end of it. But as he stepped through the double doors, the hum of murmured voices greeted him. Something was off. People were whispering, stealing glances at him. His stomach tightened. At the front of the courtroom, Naomi stood, no longer in the simple outfit she'd been wearing the day before. She was dressed in a sharp navy suit, her hair neatly pulled back. She looked like she belonged there, not as a defendant, but as someone who commanded the room. "What the hell?" Matt muttered under his breath. "Your Honor," Naomi said, her voice carrying through the room with precision and authority. "Before we proceed, I'd like to state for the record that I am a federal prosecutor, and I will be representing myself in this matter." Matt froze. The air seemed to leave the room. The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback. "Ms. Bennett, this is highly irregular." Naomi smiled faintly. "Yes, Your Honor, but given the circumstances of my arrest, I feel it's necessary to personally address the allegations and the officer's conduct." Matt's heart pounded in his chest as the realization sank in. This wasn't going to be routine. This was a nightmare. Naomi turned slightly, her eyes meeting Matt's from across the room. For the first time, he saw something flicker in her gaze, something he couldn't place. It wasn't anger or smugness. It was colder than that, purposeful. "You've made a big mistake, Officer Walker," she said, her voice steady. "And today, we're going to talk about it." The courtroom fell silent, every eye on Matt as the weight of her words settled over him like a storm cloud. Naomi Bennett stood tall, her commanding voice resonating. "Your Honor, I intend to argue not only my innocence but to address a pattern of abuse within law enforcement that this officer's actions represent. I request this case be given the weight it deserves." The murmurs in the room grew louder. Officer Matt Walker sat frozen at the defendant's table, his usual confidence cracking. The courtroom felt like it was closing in on him. This wasn't supposed to happen. People like Naomi, calm, composed, professional, didn't belong in a holding cell. And they certainly didn't end up dismantling his actions in front of a judge. Naomi began her case with the poise of someone who had lived in courtrooms for years. She detailed her arrest, sticking to the facts but making each word hit like a hammer. "I was stopped with no clear reason provided," Naomi said, glancing briefly at Matt. "Despite presenting valid identification and cooperating fully, I was accused of resisting authority, a charge that's often used as a catch-all when no real crime has been committed. This isn't an isolated incident. This is a systemic issue." Matt shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Every word felt like a dart aimed directly at his chest. He wanted to defend himself, but his attorney had warned him to stay quiet. Speaking out now would only make things worse. Naomi walked toward the jury box, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. "Your Honor, I have years of experience prosecuting cases like this. I've seen how power can be abused, and I've fought against it. But yesterday, I became the target of that abuse. And today, I stand here not just for myself, but for everyone who's ever been on the receiving end of unwarranted profiling." Her words landed heavily, and for the first time, Matt began to feel something other than frustration or anger. There was a gnawing sensation in his chest, something dangerously close to guilt. As Naomi presented her evidence, she displayed a quiet ruthlessness. She called on witnesses, people who had been in the courtroom during Matt's previous cases. One after another, they recounted incidents where Matt had overstepped his authority, his actions rooted more in prejudice than in justice. In the end, the courtroom became a place of reckoning, not just for Matt but for the broader issues Naomi exposed. The consequences rippled far beyond the individuals involved, becoming a catalyst for meaningful change.